Good afternoon, all. Thank you so much for joining us. We will get started with our session in just about a minute or two. Okay, it is exactly 1 o'clock, so good afternoon to you all. I am Paula Fontana, Vice President of Strategic Programming Initiatives with the National Black MBA Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to part 1 of our entrepreneurship series, Reckoning with Uncertainty, presented by Andre Folks. So as an association, we identified the need to provide more support and programming to our entrepreneur membership base. And Andre is definitely a critical piece of that strategy for us for 2020. So a little bit about our speaker for today. For the past 10 years, he has been working to grow the technology startup ecosystem in Memphis, Tennessee, through a venture development organization he co-founded called StartCo. He leads the charge to build and operate new programs and resources for the inclusion of minorities, women, students, and social organizations. Having worked in startups, wealth and money management, small business and entrepreneurship, government, nonprofit, and economic and community development, he has allowed him to accumulate a unique set of skills to build social, political, and financial capital for growing entrepreneurial ecosystems and startups. Andre, what an impressive background. Thank you so much for joining us. You now have the floor.
Great. Thank you, Paula, and thank you everyone for setting aside a little bit of your time today. Again, my name is Andre Folks, and we have an organization called StartCo based in Memphis, Tennessee. And even though we started out in helping technology companies over a decade ago, we wanted to meet our community more where they are, Memphis being a majority Black city. More social enterprises, governments looking for support, and also helping our local corporations invest heavily as well. And so it's been a pleasure to work with the National Black MBA and identifying new entrepreneurs, working with those who are within the member base and helping them better navigate the environments that they're in. And this is quite fitting considering the first half of this year and what we're facing. And that's why we're calling this first session Rethinking Your Business, Reckoning with Uncertainty. There is a lot of uncertainty that we have found ourselves in. We've seen a pandemic that's not just affecting the world, but disproportionately affecting people of color. We're seeing it disproportionately affecting Black business owners and people of color who are entrepreneurs. And now we're seeing a state of civil unrest that is also very tiresome and wearing folks down. And so it's forcing us to rethink our strategies, how we navigate our business environments, how do we launch new solutions, where do we need to cut costs and move things forward. And so we're going to spend a little bit of time with you today and just walk you through some things that we've been seeing with many of the businesses and entities that we've been working with. Just a little bit of an agenda. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about level setting the business. Really thinking through where are you at today, how do you analyze it, and starting to position yourself to take some steps going forward, considering that we're in a very fluid environment. We'll walk you through this assessment, breaking down a business or your path to entrepreneurship into 20 components and how you assess those. We'll get into some questions and answers from the group halfway through and also towards the end. And we'll close really identifying a building process that could help you in moving things forward with your business idea, solution, or technology. Everything that I'm touching on today, our website is called www.neverstop.co. That's CO. And towards the bottom of the homepage, you'll see toolkits. And there are several toolkits there. And I reference a lot of open source documents and tools and even videos that we put together if you ever want to reference and look at it after the webinar today. So just to hop right in, where are we? Typically, we would see a recession take approximately 6 months to bring us into it. And we saw for many parts of our economy, a recession hit overnight. And we were immediately thrown into this state of uncertainty of trying to figure out what to do. And I think what we need to start assessing is our original problem. For those of us who are in business today or starting a business, there has to be a problem that you are solving. And is that problem still relevant? Have we asked ourselves those questions? Have we talked with our staff or our team members to really start to lay it out and consider maybe there's a new set of problems that we have to solve? Just to walk through a few examples, has there been a customer shift? There have been some customers who've been eliminated because businesses are shut down. Maybe they're not doing business anymore, and so you're finding yourselves not in a position to work with them. Or maybe altogether the customer has been eliminated and we have to rethink who our customer is. And that forces us to rethink our relevancy of our products and our services. How relevant are they during a period of an economy that has stalled? How relevant are they during a period of trying to reopen? And how relevant will they be when we get into this new normal? And we have to make sure that we're delivering on our value proposition through these different stages. And the other thing we spend a lot of time on is really thinking through your client journey. From the time they wake up in the morning to the time they go to bed, you're trying to fit into their behavior and you're trying to make things easier for them. And is that client journey a little bit different? We'll give a few examples of this as we get further into the presentation. The other thing is, how are your assumptions? A lot of times, many people begin a business and they're not as tactical in terms of understanding what is the cost to acquire their customers? What is the lifetime value of their customers? And maybe we need to go back and do some data mining and revisit it. Understanding what it requires from you to acquire a customer is very critical right now when times are tight. We have to be very lean and we want to maximize the use of our dollars. And you also want to make sure that we are very strong in terms of understanding what revenue is generated off of our clients and for how long. And so the financial and operational assumptions are very, very important. Many times we forget about the back end. The front end, we're always customer focused, but on the back end of your business, what are your supplier relationships like? Do you have different locations that you're navigating? Do you have the right information systems that are out there? If you think about it, many of us have had to go to a virtual state of existence overnight. Many of us did not have the systems in place to do that. Can we get a little bit more organized for that? And so we want to make sure that we are planning out our growth strategies, operational strategies. Do we need new ones? And also understand that the business landscape is a moving target. We've been spending quite a bit of time in the Memphis region, and I'm sure in your areas of the country, you've been seeing this as well, in the food and beverage industry. This is an industry in hospitality that was immediately shut down overnight, and they resorted to providing to-go services or delivery services or things of that nature. And so we're starting to see these phases reopen, but we've had to help them come up with all new strategies. Same thing in the staffing industry. This has been majorly disrupted because this economy has hit us so hard. Healthcare, because at one point there were non-essential surgeries that were not taking place anymore. And this caused a ripple effect across the supply chain. And so you're seeing folks, for example, in the caretaking business, they weren't able to generate deal flow of new clients because the surgeries had stopped. And then those of you who are starting up companies in the startup realm, the markets took a big hit, right? We saw a huge collapse in the markets. And so people decided to become a little bit more tighter with their private equity and venture investment. Now the markets have started to recover, but we're really on fragile ground. Each one of these areas as examples are dealing with the pandemic and the current environment very, very differently. This is a chart that we spend a little bit of time working with companies around. When you start a business or you're rethinking how to look at a product or a service, you immediately start burning through time, money, and resources. And you fall down into this valley. We call it the valley of death because it's a series of fits and starts. And many times we never make it back out. We give up on it, we run out of time, and we never actually scale it and grow it into positive returns to get to what works and get to the vision that we had originally. And if you think about this further expanded, this is the state that people are in when they're launching something new. And this doesn't matter if you're a new company or an existing company launching a project. You have a problem and you have an idea for that problem. And you go through this, maybe this isn't going to work. Let's try it again. We were able to allocate some resources. Okay, people are skeptical in the community. Let's go back to the drawing board. And you go through this process. And it's very important that you understand that this is all part of the situation in the game. Many times we'll see entrepreneurs give up too early, all right, or not spend enough time moving forward through this process. And we want to work with you to add a little bit more structure and a framework here. And what we recommend is kind of going back to the basics. Have we done the market analysis? Do we understand the primary and secondary research that needs to go into the new solution that we're trying to put out there? And at the same time, are we going to go talk to our clients or our potential clients? We are very big believers in what we call a customer discovery process. And this customer discovery process is vital. The number one reason for business failure is premature execution. And so we advertise that we should go talk to 50 customers for every customer segment that we have before we launch something. And we want to test 4 hypotheses around our concept or our idea. One, what is the problem and is it the right problem? Is it severe enough to the customers that we're going to be targeting? And have we actually thought through the right customer profile? We can't go to market on every customer in the world. We have to be more pinpointed so that we can be efficient with resources. The second thing is your solutions. Many times in the beginning, we have lots of ideas, right? But you have to, at first, narrow it down to the 20 set of the features that satisfy 80% of the customers. And this is getting your product or service to a minimum viable product. And once you hone in on that solution set, you still don't have a business yet. You then have to start thinking through the value or the price of that solution set. And have we talked to customers, asked them what they would pay, had them give feedback to you, and let that influence your decisions. And even if you are able to get them to hone in on price, we still have to then think through the behavior of the customers. You have to go to market through different channels and you have to fit into their behavior. These are the things that we want to have conversations with many, many customers or potential customers before we actually launch a product or a service. Many times we call this the 3Ds process, going through discovery, delivery of the service, and then the dollars phase, which is focused on being able to put the right business case together so you are worthy for investment or future resources. And that could go for if you're raising capital in the capital markets, or that can go for if you need to get an internal department to approve a budget so that you can work with your team to go forward. So this is something that we work with many corporations on and many entrepreneurs on, and being a little bit more innovative in their approach at the process for launching new things. And I just wanted to take a quick pause and see if there's any questions and for us right now. I'm not sure if any have popped up, but we kind of covered quite a bit of content there, and I just wanted to open it up real quick.
Yeah, so there is one question, and that is for a company by the name of Harlem Fine Arts Show. It is an event business, and they need assistance moving to a virtual business model, specifically new technology to make things work. Any recommendations there?
Well, I think I would have a lot of questions, right? So one, understanding what type of event business that they are and they're delivering on. But yes, I think overall, I would really want to understand better, is their customer shifting at all? So first, is their customer going to be the same that they're going to tap through the digital markets? Because I'm not sure of what their current marketing channels are right now. And so I would really look at doing a canvas. We call it a brand strategy canvas. It's found on the toolkit that we have on our website. And it'd be good for you to take your team through that brand strategy canvas so that you could better understand who you would be targeting through that virtual platform. I think this is very, very important. The other thing is, what are the different services that are going to be offered through that platform? So these are a few questions that we would have for them that would better allow us to provide direction to it. Other things to think about on the operational side is what other information systems and management systems need to integrate into that platform. And so better understanding what those systems are to make sure that this virtual platform has a back end that can help them move forward, I think would be very important. What we don't want to do is just go right out there, find any offering that's on the web without doing some research to make sure it speaks to our needs. And I think it needs to speak to our needs both on the customer side, the customer facing side, and also on the back end side operationally, because you don't want to have it where you can't access any of the data or other information that's coming through that platform. So those are just some things that I would recommend thinking through that would help drive who you should leverage in terms of the platform.
Awesome. A couple more great questions. First one is, can you please restate the number one failure of a business again? What is the number one failure?
Premature execution. Okay. So if you think about it, many times we've been taught all our lives to just go out and write a business plan, which we have to do. But I think sometimes we think that it's only a research effort, and we'll go spend a weekend in the library and we'll just spend that whole weekend putting together some numbers. The issue behind that is, what are the assumptions that are going to back up those numbers? And so what we find ourselves is we'll go out there and put a business plan together, and then we'll just begin. We'll try to rally some resources together, maybe get some funding, and prematurely we launch something. And so that's why we are adding into the mix, as you're putting together your business plan, to talk to your customers, do the market analysis, work on the assumptions, right? Even run a few experiments first. You'd be surprised what you can learn by running a few experiments, testing your solution to figure out what doesn't work so that you can fix it before you actually launch. So yes, the number one reason is premature execution, and that goes across all elements of the business, whether it's operations, management, revenue streams, et cetera.
Awesome. Next question is, how often do startups get out of the valley of death?
Well, there's varying statistics, so you've seen, depending upon how you define a startup, you've seen failure rates of 90%. And those are many when you look at the tech sector. If you branch out and look at the small business realm, incorporating other brick and mortar and those types of things, you see failure rates of about 70%. So, I think what happens is, even those that can make it past the first few years, many never pull themselves out into what we call true market entry. So let me provide a little background on what that means. When you're first getting started, you have an idea. We call it, you're in the imagining phase, right? You're imagining about the idea. You're trying to see if there's a concept there. You're doing some research and analysis. Then you move into what we call an incubating stage, where there's actually something here and you decide to start building it. You start prototyping it or designing it or mapping it out, how you would actually deliver this product or service. Then at some point you get to what we call the demonstrating phase, where you actually put it in the hands of some customers to see what happens. There are many of us who end up stuck in the demonstrating phase, right? We work with a lot of companies that have been around for 10 years. They may even be, doing $1 to $2 or $3 million a year in business, but nothing has changed in many, many years. And they've just been in this demonstration phase, just trying to hold on. And then there's the few who actually step into the market. And what I mean by that is they can turn the spigot on, right? Any type of inbound traffic coming in, they can handle, and they can grow and scale. And so there are few who actually make it out. there are so many more who are in this demonstrating phase, and they've kind of been stuck in that phase for a while. It's tough. It's tough out there.
Mm, it is. Next question. How can you create a business model for a saturated market such as cosmetics?
Well, I think the key is, is there a problem that sits within that market that others are not honing in on? That would be one of the first things I would be very interested in. Are they all going one direction, and can you go another direction? I'm curious about the customer segments that are sitting out there. And is there something else that sits out there that you could target in terms of that customer mix? But I'd have to understand a little bit more about the numbers and the saturation rates and what's happening there. The other thing is, depending upon whatever your product or service is, what is the solution set, right? I mean, is it a innovative revenue model? You saw many years ago, you saw subscription boxes start to come out for the cosmetic industry. And so that was something very unique. Well, now you're seeing more technology platforms because there's a lot of folks who were basically, we called it on the black market, trying to move products on Craigslist. So you saw more technology come in. So my question would be, what would be the innovation that you are bringing to the cosmetic industry that maybe someone else isn't thinking about? And that could be the missing ingredient to advancing things forward. We've worked with a couple of companies years ago, who were in that realm. And they were even looking at the data component, how much data could be collected in the cosmetic industry through a lot of these platforms that are out there, and could they sell that data to market research companies? So I'd have to learn a lot more, but there's a lot in there depending upon what angle and what innovation you're trying to drive. So that's just a little perspective, but it's tough not knowing the exact details of what they're trying to do.
Great. And then last question for this segment is, do you see a market for a Black-owned business marketplace? With the state of the country, I feel we're in a good place to better promote Black-owned businesses.
I think the question would come down to, who would be the customer segment for this marketplace, right? So am I the right customer segment to answer that question? I think there is a movement that's happening. So I have been tracking demand in terms of how do we support Black business. I think one of the issues is let's remove the marketplace, for example, and talk about what's out there today. A lot of times we have a lot of haphazard approaches to how we support one another and how we go about launching efforts and businesses. And so could a solution be to be a little bit more concerted, create a marketplace? I think the question is, there's a lot of marketplaces that are out there, and is the demand high enough to support one that is it exclusively for people of color? Is it just that it's by people of color? Could anyone come on the marketplace? This would impact majorly, my answer to that thing. But I do think that there is going to be a shift, and there is going to be an opportunity for a marketplace like this, but not having more details. It's tough to state specifically one way or the other.
Great. And
Yeah.
questions continue to come in, but we'll get back to them at the next section. How does that sound?
That sounds perfect.
Great.
Okay, so this is something that we spend quite a bit of time on. It's a growth wheel, and it breaks your business into 20 components. If you're in the very early stage, we're in the left top corner here in the business concept phase. Okay, and we're really trying to understand the idea, what merit is behind the idea, but then also understanding that you might have multiple ideas that make up a product portfolio. And how do you bring those products together where there's economies of scale in how you launch them? We also look at the business model, the customer mix that you have, and then what position in the market do you want? That's just an example for those who are starting out. What we would do is we would ask you to rank each one of these. We keep it simple on a scale of 1 to 10, just to show where you think you are in terms of its progression. And you're not going to be perfect or great in all of them. And then you set a goal for where you want to be. So you might say, well, with regard to our product portfolio, I think we're very weak. We're a 2 out of a 10. I'd love to be at a 6, maybe within 90 days. We're going to spend X activities working towards that goal. And what you do is you do this for all 20 components of the business. You prioritize what you want to focus on, all right? And you start to work on those activities over the days and the weeks ahead. And these things could change. There could be some things that you're ranked 2 out of a 10, but you're okay with that, right? Maybe facilities. Maybe you don't need a big office. Maybe you're fine working from home or having a small space at a co-working facility or something along those lines. All we're asking you to do is think about the future. And if there is going to be an expansion where you will have facility needs, be planning for that. So this is just a good way from a macro level to look in on 20 components of your business. Ask yourself, where do you think you're at? And what we've been doing because of the pandemic and the current situation is forcing folks to revisit this and think about it. Okay, prioritize them and then come up with to-do lists on what they want to work on. And it's making them rethink what is relevant from before. This is very, very important in terms of what was pre-COVID-19. Is that still going to be the same way you do things post-COVID-19? And I want to elaborate on this, just a little bit. This is what I was talking about here just a moment ago. And I would be asking yourselves, how has your business concept changed? Okay. We got one question that spoke to creating a virtual platform. Well, does that mean that the concept changes at all? Are there other offerings that you're going to bring to the table? And then you start thinking through the product portfolio and that portfolio mix, has that changed? So these are things that are going to be very important. One area could be the business model. How do you make money? All right. And you might have to get creative now, depending upon what you're doing. I think one thing I've been having a lot of dialogue with businesses on is repurposing their products and services to new markets. Okay. One of the things I mentioned before was staffing company, and they're seeing things dry up pretty dramatically. And we were working with this one company, really thinking through what they bring to the table. They have access to talent. They know how to train talent. They know how to deploy talent. Okay. And so one of the things we spent a little time talking about was the fact that there's all these new labor positions being created around the pandemic. All right. There's new testing going on. We're looking at things where there's going to have to be policing, contact tracing. There's all these things from a reporting standpoint that's going to take place. And you have to prop up staff and get them moving forward. So they're really looking at using their core capabilities and systems, but applying it a little bit differently than just calling up an employer asking, do they have any staffing needs? And this is something that we feel that most should be at least thinking through, depending upon where you're at in terms of the business ecosystem ripple effect. There's a ripple effect happening across the economy right now. In the very beginning, you saw the restaurant industry get hit huge. And then there's a little bit of a delay of a month or so. We saw healthcare get hit really, really big. And you're seeing these ripple effects. If you look at the supply chain, farming, and things of that nature, where are you in that ripple effect? And then you need to start assessing that. And this gets you into the market position, right? Where do you sit in the market? And we need to get ahead of that ripple effect if it's coming to your industry here pretty soon. To give you an example, we went through this exercise with, there's about 15 restaurants that we're working with in the Memphis region. And just to give you an example of one of the things that we were talking to them about was that growth wheel. And let's just use this example. You have a business idea. Let's just say there's demand for a sports bar, restaurant that can serve the needs of the casual drinker, the sports enthusiast. It's an round-all catch-all for starting your evening, out on the weekend. They serve mediocre drinks, simple food, always accompanied by maybe drinking. There could be a band or some music. Their business model is a volume model, regular crowds, usually 3 to 5 visits per week. There's a cover charge. Their customer portfolio, they have a good mix and use of the bar to hit several segments. They might have day drinkers, they might have pre-partiers, they have eaters, and their market positions have been strong due to location, flexibility, and multi-use functions of the actual establishment. Well, this is pre-COVID-19. Well, all of that got thrown out the window when they were told here in the Memphis area to shut down on March 19th. All of this was gone now. The business idea was completely gone. The product portfolio was mostly gone. You think about the volume model for the crowds, it was gone. The customer portfolio was gone. And what do I mean by that? Most of these were in the downtown area. They relied on business from the major corporations that were in the area. All of them were working remote. All of a sudden, that crowd is gone, and they've been replaced by the residential crowd who's now there all day because they're working from home, but they have no way to engage them because that was never their customer before. Again, it forced them to rethink everything. And I would highly advise those entrepreneurs on the line to also rethink those things. Okay. This is highly important. Now you're talking about delivery services, creating online platforms. We work with them to build technologies to be able to do orders online. We work with them to link them up to food delivery services so they can actually make those things. And we had them working together to create economies of scale because money is tight. And so, some decided not to do anything and they just shut their doors for a temporary time. Others have kind of been in the trenches just trying to work through it. But this is just an example of how an industry is majorly disrupted. And now they're faced with looking at the next waves or phases that are rolling in, but at the same time trying to now focus on PPE, health safety standards, and making sure they're doing good by not only their staff, but their customers. So a very different environment that they're sitting in right now. Now, this is a chart that we put together in conjunction with some partners of ours in Ohio called Jumpstart. And really, it's kind of looking at that valley of death diagram that we were talking with you about earlier, and really kind of walking you through those phases that I mentioned. So if you kind of look here in terms of the imagining phase, that's very early when you have those ideas. And as you go across, you can see where you're at in terms of that valley. I mean, the ultimate goal is to take the idea to something that you can truly launch and you begin scaling and moving things forward. I think this is very important so you can understand what level are you at. If you're on the left-hand side of this chart, you're at the early stage. You're an entrepreneur trying to get something off the ground. If you're on the right-hand side of this chart, you could go as high as a big corporation and you're trying to rethink and position things. These are all things that we think are important. Let's talk about the right-hand side of the chart for a moment. What we're having to revisit because of COVID-19 is, are we still coherent in the things that we were before COVID-19, right? And what I mean by that is, typically, if you are a well-oiled machine business, there's 3 to 6 capabilities that drive almost every decision that you're doing, okay? I'll give you an example. Walmart was very, very good in terms of inventory management, point of sale, and how they use financial capital. Those 3 things came together great, and that makes them the organization and company that they are today. Everything that they do is touched by those 3 things. So you have to ask yourself, what are your core capabilities that move your business forward and are achieving the results that you need? And then you have to ask yourself, well, what about all the other things you're doing that don't fit into those core things? And this is where you get sidetracked. These are other things that don't fit into the process. Maybe you're doing it because you need to make a little extra money and that pulls you off to the side. But at some point, you want to get to what we call the coherence premium, right? And this was written through a PwC report a number of years ago. We're working to become coherent. We don't want to have it where we are serving a variety of customers doing something different for all of them. We want to have the ease of doing business and not having things slow us down. And then you get stuck sometimes in what I call one-off business or consulting business. People will hear your core competency and say, well, that sounds great, but could you do this for me? And many times, because we're cash strapped, we just go ahead and do those things. And so what we're really talking about is putting the systems in place that allow you to scale and move forward. We touch on this in the coming webinars that we'll have at a future date when we get into the operating model and really understanding what we need to deliver on those many things. Those of us who are not at this point yet, we're still trying to put the pieces together to hopefully get there at a certain point. And many times we're dealing with a situation of putting together bootstrap strategies. So we've been having a lot of conversations around revenue streams and business development efforts. Well, that comes down to relationships. If you have not been a very relationship-oriented business, whether that's face-to-face, digitally, and building partnerships, it's going to be a very tough environment for you right now. But there are a few things that we spend some time thinking through. One, what type of network do you have, right? So we go back to the assessment of the business. Is our network solid? Does it contribute to the business that we want it to? Does it solve problems for the business? Okay. This all comes down to your relationships, and I'm hoping we're storing our relationships in some type of client management system. Then you want to start thinking through, have I built any centers of influences for my business? And what I mean by centers of influences today is really thinking through who else is serving your exact client, but they're not competition. So for me personally, as an example, when I was a investment advisor, we managed people's money, we worked with accountants, we worked with mortgage brokers and estate planners, all of which who had high net worth clients, but we weren't competition. And what do? We referred business to one another, okay? So you have to be working to build 5 to 6 centers of influences to help you move your business forward. At the same time, I'm assuming you have a lead list that you're working or new opportunities that you're working to generate the returns that you want. Those returns can come in the form of new business. They can come in the form of new investment, new partnerships. And what are we waking up every day? Are we calling upon these people or reaching out to them? The other thing we'll touch on is the sales process. Have you mapped out your sales process? Do you understand what the duration is? Do you understand what the scripts are needed through that sales process? And is your team aligned on how that goes? There's a lot of assumptions in sales, and we have to be very tight on those assumptions. This would be something else we would be highly recommending people reevaluating during this time as pertains to business development. And then obviously we want to make sure you're looking at your numbers and your financials. If you need to be able to forecast where you think the business is going to be tomorrow, 90 days, a year, 2 years from now. And then finally, we also want to make sure, are we becoming what we call an expert at our craft? Okay, if you have a business, there's something that you are very good at that you are bringing to market, but do we promote that through content? Do we share content with our customers in the community? And are we doing this on a consistent basis that helps us build better relationships? It's a good time now to go back and reevaluate our business development efforts. Maybe we hadn't had to spend a lot of time on that more recently, but because of the situation that we're in, building these relationships and working on these things we think are very, very important. And as we kind of move this forward here, we want to make sure that, we're looking at sometimes going back to the basics. During this state of uncertainty, there's an effort that we look at, we call it zero-based entrepreneurship design. It's almost like zero-based accounting, where you take the budget back to zero and start from scratch, rather than incremental adjustments to a budget. And that's what we're talking about during this session with you today. Sometimes, even if you are down a path already, go through an exercise with your team. Ask these questions. Do some customer discovery out there by talking to your clients. See what's still relevant, what's not relevant anymore. And what you're doing is you're going back to your origins to uncover these core capabilities and systems that get you back to that 0 point or laying that stronger foundation for growth. And you're setting your sights on the ideal state. This is something we talk with businesses about all the time. What is your vision? Many times we're not waking up every day having a vision or having sights on that North Star that's constantly guiding us. And we need to make sure that we reevaluate that at this particular time. But touching here, we want to be able to work fast. Some of the things we'll talk about during this series is being able to go through quick sprints, getting out there quickly, talking to customers, taking the feedback and applying it to the business. Right now, we don't have time to spend a year figuring out what are some of the things that we can do now. And so the toolkits that I was referencing to you, that's on our website, it walks you through this process, right? And we have some folks who are using it. They're going out there and they'll talk to 10 customers a week. That's informing the adjustments they're making to their business. That's informing the adjustments they're making to their financial model. And they're launching new solutions to deal with the situation at hand. And so hopefully that tool and that toolkit will help you, and you can work through that with your team. We touched on it a little bit here, but just to give you a couple of examples, there's been a lot of folks who've had to reinvent. There's a few companies that we've been working with, here in the Memphis region and then elsewhere, because we work with folks all over the country who've had to look at things differently. We've noticed that those who were selling on property managers and office managers of apartment complexes now have had to become much more virtual in terms of their platforms. We've seen those who are in the caretaking industry have to deal with the fact that they're not allowed in nursing facilities right now. And we've had to work through solutions. But they've been able to see success with regards to now selling on hospital systems who are now needing more caretaking support. We've seen people who were using an event-based strategy in terms of launching their companies have to switch to more digital marketing. These are things that we think are very, very important. And sometimes even the slightest shift can help you gain a little bit of traction and move things forward. So we ask you to consider all types of possibilities. Doesn't mean you have to go and blow up everything that you're doing right now, but you should evaluate it and say, are those solutions still working? Are they serving the customers of the past? And do we need to shift to a new customer? All right. What are the different products and services? Can technology help? All right. Do we need virtual platforms or other forms? Do we need to look more to data to help us be better decision makers? And then operationally, what's going to allow us to have better processes and systems in place? Because now we are thrown into a situation of maybe our teams are located on different parts of the city versus working in the office together. And we have to facilitate that as well. So these are all things we know you're already working on. We're just trying to bring a framework to it so that you have some things to rely on to help keep pushing you forward. I wanted to go ahead and open up to some other questions and answers that we might have from the group and be happy to hear those now.
Yes. So first question is, what advice do you have for entrepreneurs in the travel and tourism industry seeing the effects of the pandemic?
Well, I think the question first is, what is the what is the business? Obviously, if you look at the landscape, we're talking about those who are airlines are considering shutting down. And we've already seen travel be affected. And we're even seeing that we're not out of the woods and we're seeing areas spike across the country. So I think the question is, what are we doing in the travel industry? And, maybe I could better help answer, what they were doing. But I would say overall, I would do a risk assessment to the business. This is an industry that's being severely disrupted, and that's coming through regulation and systemic concerns. And I would put together what I call a risk table, so I can understand better where I'm at. And all that means is, what are the key risks that keep you up at night? Okay. What is the likelihood that it's going to happen? If it does happen, what is your contingency plan? And then what is it going to cost you? And so sometimes doing a risk table on the actual situation helps you think it through a little bit better. But in terms of forecasting where that industry is going to go, that is not my industry. So I can't really give any insights on where that's going to be.
All righty. Next question is, I run an outsourced chief financial officer firm. What opportunities do you see for remote accounting?
Well, I think there's lots of opportunities. I think really the question is, we're having to do it now. So there's a point where is it going to go? So I think what happened is all of a sudden overnight, people became virtual and they had to get the job done. And we just kind of figured it out. Now, what does the new normal look like? And can we set a target on that? I think you're going to see a lot of it come back, right? Meaning the in-person thing, but a lot of it won't. And how important will the virtual platform or remote work be to the types of clients that you're working with? For example, there are some businesses that are staying virtual, period, and they have no intention. And so, is that the type of client that you want to focus on, considering that's what you're providing could be a solution to them? And there are others who will go back to business as usual. And so, I think I would really want to understand the customer segment by talking to customers to figure out where they want to be in the future and how comfortable they are in terms of having maybe this type of service where they don't have that face-to-face interaction. I think people are getting more comfortable. So if you were to ask me that a year ago, it would be a tough sell to a lot of folks across America. But now I think more people would be open. I would do the market analysis to understand that shift, and I'd like to understand what type of market opportunity sits there. So if you're I'm not sure what type of company you are, if you're a small business or you're striving to be a startup company, I would want to make sure there's a big enough marketplace to support. That way, when I make some mistakes, there's still plenty of customers to sell on. So I think there's great opportunity there. My background's in financial services, and we've been seeing a shift in terms of fintech for now over the past 10 years. I think the question is identifying the right customer market.
Excellent. Our next question is, many communities are beginning to reopen. How does the reopening impact the growth wheel and the strategy elements you described? Taking your restaurant as an example.
I think it changes things, right? So I think here's how some misinterpreted it in the beginning. They thought we would go back to normal, right? So we go back to March or into February, we were looking at the growth wheel, everything shut down overnight. They deployed delivery service, online strategies, et cetera. Then they were itching for this day to come. And when the day came, it did not come in the way that they thought it would. They thought it would, all of a sudden doors would be open and people would come in. And so that didn't happen. So what we had to spend a lot of time doing is guessing what type of volume they could see coming back into the business, and then forecasting how they could use the new solutions that they built, and maybe they could make up the difference, right? So some of these places did not have any type of delivery service or online platform. And so what we ended up having to work with them on was, well, inside the restaurant, they had to be spaced out 6 feet apart. So that meant that their capacity was already down to 25% or now getting up to 50. They had to look at strategies to go outside the restaurant if they could for outside seating, because maybe they can make up a few of those tables. So again, your value delivery service is different. Now you're serving outside. Are you stocked for that? Can you do that? And then they're now doing digital marketing strategies to push people to the website to order food for pickup. And so they're kind of in a hybrid approach now. And so the growth wheel is still evolving every time a phase shifts, but we've had to spend quite a bit of time forecasting where they thought they would be. And it wasn't good enough just to do that. We literally had to help them logistically map out scenarios of what would happen when doors open. I mean, literally drawing circles on the floor in the restaurant, thinking spacing out and those types of things. And this is why we always say the analysis is good. It gets better when you start experimenting and actually testing some things before doors actually open. So hopefully that answers a little bit that question.
Great. Speaking of circles, this listener wants to circle back to the slide you shared on path to business growth. Do you have a customer-centric view of this growth engine? For example, in the tech sector, we focus on the buyer's journey and their needs along each stage to provide data and insights to sales and marketing on how to succeed.
So a customer version of this, no, we don't. That's actually a good idea. This is mostly business driven, the entrepreneur. Now, through that process, there is a way that we work with them in terms of engaging customers and fitting into their behavior. But in terms of a graphic or something along those lines, we don't. That's actually a pretty good idea.
Great. And that concludes the questions in the chat for now.
So I think overall, that's most of the content that we wanted to cover on. And I just wanted to leave with a few thoughts. Um, we're in a very tough environment. And so the premise of today was to just talk out loud, think about some things that you could be working on that you can go back to your teams with, maybe find some elements on that toolkit, watch a few videos, et cetera. Um, Spoke a little bit to this on terms of risk and looking at the landscape that you're building in. We're going to get into that in the next session. And then we're going to spend another one really diving into sales and making sure the operational capacity is there to support sales because so many people are struggling financially right now. And so we would ask for you to be thinking those things through. You know, what does your sales model look like? Have we actually mapped it out? Do we actually know the assumptions that sit out there? What we tend to find is when we would first sit down with the business and do like an assessment or what we call a level set meeting, they would realize that there's a lot of questions that they don't have the answers to. And they would start to go do the data mining or go back and look at their numbers so they could better answer those questions because that would inform what they would want to do going forward. I think the key is without knowing some of the data, it's very difficult, right? So I mentioned earlier, cost to acquire versus lifetime value. You know, understanding, well, what are all the, functions of the business that are contributing to acquiring a customer and how much does that cost you? And the function of time, money, and resources. And then how much money do we make over the lifetime? And so, many times it's tough for us to break even on a client, okay? And many times we don't track the actual real amount of time we're spending acquiring them. We could have been talking to them for a long time and working with them, and then finally they come on board. Well, maybe it took you 18 months before they came on board. Getting the numbers here better tells us what we should be focusing on or not. These are things we would hope that you'd be evaluating right now so that you can make better decisions. And that would also become much more relevant as we get into a couple of these other sessions here going forward. So that's mostly what we have for today. Hopefully this was helpful. I think that there is continued state of uncertainty that we're going to see going through the second half of the year. I think we also need to be putting contingency plans together in terms of how this phasing approach, this reopening, and then also the uptick of cases will affect certain communities. So I just think that these are things we're all thinking about. And if we can be deliberate on this type of thinking on a week in and week out basis, and I know it's hard because we're busy, it'll help us stay ahead of it.
Awesome. And as you are wrapping up, we have one final question.
Sure.
And that was, as a San Francisco-based VC, how can we better connect with and support groups like National Black MBA and StartCo?
I would say, there's several things, right? And we can take this question in many different ways. Obviously, there's a national dialogue going on right now. Even before COVID-19, there's great disparity in terms of support of people of color through the launching of tech startups or entrepreneurship, for that matter. I think the overall key is to provide supports to the businesses that we organizations are working with. A lot of folks point straight to money right off the bat, which yes, of course. If there's a company that's quality, you'll invest in them. You'll go through your process and get them on a watch list and go through that. However, most need guidance because they have not had exposure to the innovation economy. And what does that mean? They don't understand how the capital markets work. They don't understand how to approach venture. They don't understand the business fundamentals that go into this because of the lack of access, right? The lack of access of mentors, guidance, and also an exposure to technology. And so what I've noticed is there's great introductions that can be made and to young entrepreneurs that are trying to grow and move forward. And I think there's also a way to spend a little time doing office hours and engaging with these entrepreneurs as well. And so, I think we're evolving as well because the fact that we are going more virtual changes how I answer that question. In the past, I would just say, join our network of partners, which I think you still can do. but we would normally do that physically through face-to-face interaction. One of the things we've been talking with the National Black MBA about is opening up our network to them of tech partners, VCs, and talent. And maybe there's an opportunity where you could be part of that group.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, Andre, for this very valuable information. I encourage you all to register and set the date for July 7th. That will be part 2 of this series where he will discuss risk and your competitive landscape. So that is July 7th at 1 p.m. Also, your feedback is very important to us, so you will receive a survey about this session. We highly encourage you to fill it out just to be sure that we are on track as it relates to programs that are important to you. I hope that all of you all continue to be well and thrive, and please enjoy the rest of your day.
Okay.
Great job.
Yeah, I think we're good.
Oh, sorry, Robin. I just saw your message.
We
There was a slide I guess I missed about Scale Up.
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I didn't see that in time. I was going to advertise Scale Up, and I forgot to do it. Maybe we can put that in a thank you note or something. Yep, and I have it right here on my notes.
Great. And then there was a note about that foundations to business, the word business is misspelled.
Oh, is it? Okay.
I'm like, thanks for putting it in the chat, whatever.
I'll have to get on our infographic person. Okay.
Right.
Well, that was great.
Awesome. Yes, it was. Thank you so much. Oh, we are still on. Robin, did you start recording?